In today's episode, we are joined by Gio Grassi. It is not Grasso, Gio Grassi. We are not related. At least we don't think so, but who knows? We might be. He's an assistant strength coach at Monmouth University, and he comes to us with an extensive background. The places that he's been all over, and obviously he kind of spanned through the course and the timeline of strength and conditioning when it was kind of changing from some of the old school ways of doing things, from waking up at 3 a.m. and going all day in an internship and then going and working a second job in the afternoon and studying for your master's at night and maybe trying to make some extra income on the side. That's where he started, and obviously he's in a better place now where he's able to actually establish himself and make an impact at Monmouth. So we discuss all things as far as like his story, the way he kind of came through in the strength and conditioning world, and we discuss a lot around what he's doing now at Monmouth, baseball, football, specifically the polar metrics that he's trying to gauge when it comes to taking a look at the positional metrics for football, some of the positions within the position, and some of the different ways that he's using force plate data, heart rate data to kind of manipulate his conversations with coaches, in addition to kind of how he's manipulating some of the exercises he's using in the weight room with baseball players to try to increase pitch speed, velocity, and arm swing velocity. So it was a great one. We talked Sopranos a little bit at the end here for all of you Soprano fans out there. So hopefully you guys enjoy this one, and let's get it going. All right, welcome back to the Samson Strength Coach Collective podcast. Today we are joined by Gio Grassi. That's an I at the end. I am your host, Anthony Grasso. We are not related. Well, we might be, actually. I'm not. We haven't like fully cleared that up. But honestly, like I was telling Gio before, when I was like putting the notes in the show notes section, I had my computer autocorrected to Grasso, and I didn't even bat an eyelash. So there actually might be something there to that. But we're super pumped to have Gio here. He is an assistant strength and conditioning coach at Monmouth University. And just to give you a little background on him, he has his Bachelor of Science from Delaware State. That was in sports sciences, movement science, and strength and conditioning. He has his master's in sport administration from Fairleigh Dickinson University. Certifications, just to list those off for you. He's got a CSCS through the NSCA. He's a strength and conditioning coach certified through the CSCCA. He has his USAW certification, Precision Nutrition Level 1 certified, and FRC. Just to give you a little bit of a brief background and overview on the places that he has been: Monmouth, Fordham, New York Giants, Hackensack UMC Fitness and Wellness, Fairleigh Dickinson, as I mentioned before, Rutgers, Parisi Speed School, Hudson Catholic Regional High School, and Delaware State. So obviously there's an extensive experience there. So yeah, man, welcome. Like, super pumped to have you on here. Obviously we've done this before and I was on your podcast, so couldn't wait to get you back on here and get you on mine. But yeah, man, if you want to just kind of give us just sort of a run through of like where this whole thing started. Obviously you've been to a ton of different places, and anytime I talk to you, there's always like some new insight that you're providing for me. So just kind of take us back to where this whole thing started and how you got to where you're at now.
No doubt. And I appreciate, let me tell you first off, man, I have a podcast, but this is the first time I'm on another podcast as a guest.
No way.
Man.
This is the first time?
Bro, this is the first time I'm on someone else's podcast.
Lifetime. It's funny because I feel like if you have a I guess that makes sense. I feel like if you have a podcast, you become so immersed in trying to like make that podcast work for you. And like, obviously I'm assuming you do a ton of like editing and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, I guess it makes sense that you would, but I figured you would have been on somebody else's prior to me. So I'm the first, dude. This makes sense. I was like, this is okay.
First one.
All right.
I was destined to be on your podcast for my first visit as a guest on someone's podcast,
Yeah, the floodgate's gonna open it from here for sure.
Yeah, definitely, man, definitely. I mean, who knows what can happen, but I appreciate you getting me on, bro, for real. Just to give everyone a background. I mean, it's funny, I've never given a background on my own podcast of myself, so this is the first. Just to give you a rundown from way back. Like, I'm a family of immigrants. My family, we came from Italy. We small town Joy. It's out there by Battipaglia, Salerno. That area, it's a little bit south of Naples, we're kind of, south side Italy, you want to consider.
Yeah, no doubt. The best side, man.
But yeah, not Sicilian. I always tell people, if someone tells you they're Sicilian, then guess what? They're not Italian. Because I don't think a Hawaiian is going to consider themselves American, and that's almost the equivalent,
It's exactly it right
there. But grew up in Jersey City. I went to Hudson Catholic High School, and that's, where I played football. I don't want to say I played every position, but I was a DB, tried out for receiver, and I was a place kicker. And by my senior year, my coach said, "Hey, look, you're going to become a D1 kicker. We just want to kick you." And I'm like, it kind of sucks to hear, but at the same time, I was so good at it, I really didn't mind. It's like, all right, you know what? If it's going to get me to the D1 level, that's what I want to play, then so be it.
Sure.
Wound up going to Dell State for, many reasons outside of football. Grades weren't that high to get into other universities, but, blessing in disguise, it turned out to be, a great thing for me for where I'm at today. And I always look back on that and say, and I always tell kids today, it's like, hey, it's not what you're doing now. It's what you can do with what you have and where you end up down the road if you have those goals and ambitions. So, I had a low GPA coming out of high school. I'm not scared to admit it. It was like a 1.7 or something like that. It was real low. Got to Dell State. I had a great coach, a great special teams coach, Coach Hall. He was always on, everything I did, man. He was on my butt, dude. It was like, if I showed up, 2 minutes before something was supposed to start, he'd say, Grassi, you got to be here 5 minutes before, 10 minutes before. Don't show up late. My strength coach was the same way, and I learned a lot from him. Coach Ray Braithwaite, he's actually the head guy at Iowa right now. So he was he actually came to us from Iowa and then went back to Iowa. Great dude, great person to learn from. I still talk to him to this day. Great human overall. Helped me build some character in the weight room, and that's kind of what I try to emulate here. Fast forward a little bit. Sophomore year, I meet a new professor, Dr. Merja, who I still talk to today. Who I consider her and her husband, Wayne, who is a retired Navy pilot, as two of my greatest mentors in life. Dr. Merja kind of guides me on my, career and my goal here. And Wayne just guides me through life. So if I ever need something from one of the two, I can always call one and talk to both at the same time. But yeah, she kind of guided me into like, hey, what do you want to do? And I told her what I wanted to do. Hey, I wanted to be a sports agent. She's like, well, you got to take law classes. You need a law degree. And I'm like, well, I don't want that. I love the weight room. I love, what happens in there. I'm jumping higher, I'm running faster. She's like, no, maybe you want to be a strength coach. Let's talk about that stuff. Love the courses. I passed biomechanics with flying colors. And she said I was, one of her best students that she ever taught. And she still talks about me to this day at where she's teaching. Where does she teach now? She was just at West Virginia. And forgive me, Doc, if I'm wrong. I don't know if you're at Hampton University. I think she is at Hampton University now.
Yeah.
Passed her courses with flying colors. Graduated my undergrad with a 3.6 GPA. So kind of looking back, like, hey, in high school, did what I did. But when you love what you do, Ant, you're going to execute. You're going to dominate it, right? You know what I'm saying? And backtrack a little bit. After my freshman year, I didn't play football no more. Ruptured a couple discs in my low back and it kind of knocked me out of kicking. Believe it or not. But I knew what I wanted to do, and I said, junior year, hey, coach, can I intern for you? I want to be a strength coach one day. He said, yeah. He left to go back to Iowa. Then we had another coach there, Ryan Johnson, and Trudell Dorsey, who he's at Morgan. Ryan Johnson was at Southeast Missouri State, and I don't know where he's at now. Don't know if he's even coaching. But they guided me along the process. Those were two of my first mentors to, kind of work with and learn from the whole ins and outs of the daily activities of a strength coach. What time do you get up in the morning? What time do you show up to work? How do you pre-plan things? How do you program? How do you set the day up? What are you doing when you're not coaching anyone? Because that's, everyone thinks we just kind of sit around and we just like, oh yeah, come in for a session, where it's like, no, we got other things to do,
Right.
So did that stuff for my junior and senior year at Dell State. Graduated, went back home. Undercover story. I worked at UPS for a couple of months just because you couldn't find a job in 2009.
Yeah.
Back in those days. I mean, it was a crazy world back, 12 years ago. Did that. And then, and I went back to my high school, and that's when I got on with Hudson Catholic at the time. There was a different head ball coach at the time. I was actually worked with Leonard Marshall, believe it or not. He was the head football coach at Hudson Catholic. And if anyone doesn't know who Leonard Marshall is, he won a Super Bowl with the Giants. He knocked Joe Montana out. And basically, I don't want to say ended his career, but basically, the rise of Steve Young came after Leonard Marshall took Joe Montana out. So credit to his stardom there. But it was great work with him, just learning about, hey, what did you guys do in the 80s as football players in the weight room? What did Lawrence Taylor do? What did you do? How was Bill Parcells as a coach? So working with him was great. He had a ton of connections, put me on. And I got to Precy Speed School there in 2010. Worked with a phenomenal group of colleagues, man. Sully Parker, Ramon Williams, RJ Cobbs, Danny Stickna. I mean, those guys, we're brothers, man. We still talk to this day. We still hang out to this day when we get chances to. We all kind of grew, got married and stuff. So, but also had the opportunity to work with greater guys. I mean, Steve Leo was the guy who brought me into the game at Precy Speed School. So big shout out to Steve Leo. Martin Rooney, who I still talk to this day. I actually had the opportunity to coach his daughter, who's running track at Notre Dame. Wow. And we share pictures of his daughter, Sophia, when she was like 12, and she's like 19 years old now. And I'm like, oh my God, man, time just flies, dude. It's unbelievable.
That is wild.
But, being able to work with him, have conversations with Bill Parisi about stuff. Those are great times and great years to just learn about speed development, change of direction, more about mechanical body positions and how to load, your foot and get your body into certain positions to, kind of, I guess, accelerate fast, change direction fast.
Sure.
But what's more optimal for speed and stuff like that. Left there because I wanted to go get my master's at, a school. Had the opportunity to go to Fairleigh Dickinson, where I learned under Kyle McMinn, who's, man, he was working with USA field hockey. Don't know if he still is. Great guy. Learned a ton from him with, that's when I started getting into like the whole pulse stuff and tracking with GPS units and whatnot. Interned for him for a year before I even got enrolled into my master's course because somebody else had G there.
Oh, okay.
Got to get my CSCCA certification under him while I was there. So I was there for 3 years. And actually my last semester there, I wanted to get back into football because they didn't have football. So that's when I interned for Rutgers. So here, dude, check this out. Here was my day in 2016, early 2017. And I don't brag about this. I just tell my interns, listen, this is what it is, right? This is what I wanted to do. I'd get up at 3 a.m, and my wife could vouch for me. Get up at 3 a.m, leave the house at 3:30, get to Rutgers by 4:30. Is an hour drive from North Jersey to, Brunswick, where Rutgers is at. Help set the weight room up, the field house up, because, guys are running in, they're lifting. I'd get out of there by 12, get back to Fairleigh Dickinson by 1:30 to start my GA ship there and work with those teams, right? So I'm doing an internship and doing the grad assistantship. Leave Fairleigh Dickinson at around 5:36, get to work at the facility, HUMC, right? Hackensack UMC Fitness and Wellness, where I was doing ACL, return to sport, personal training clients, just to make money because you got to pay bills, right? I did that from 6 to about 9:30, 10 p.m. Eat, sleep, repeat, man. Did that 5 days straight for about 4 months. And I'm also studying for my master's at the same time. So that's all I did on Sundays and the weekends, man. It was boring. I'm coaching, I'm training, I'm traveling, I'm studying, I'm doing papers. It was boring, stressful, but it was all worth it. I loved it. I wouldn't trade it for a damn thing in this world, man. Got lucky. Coach Wellman called me from the New York Giants, interviewed me for the position there. Accepted the position. Obviously, I was there for the year. That was great working alongside Coach Wellman, who's a smart dude. Coach Marcus Paul, rest in peace, who, sadly passed away at the Dallas Cowboys facility where he was the head strength coach there. Great. I mean, I learned a ton from Coach Paul, man, just learning how to fit in. And my biggest question to him was, how have you been a guy that went from being a player in the NFL to just coaching in the NFL? And he said, Gio, I just learned to fit in. And that's half the job sometimes. You just got to be able to fit in and mingle and, get along with the players and coaches. And he taught me a lot about how to just be you and have your own personality and don't try to emulate someone else that you worked for.
Sure.
Coach Joe Dano, smart dude, man. He's down at the University of Florida now. Learned a lot from him with catapult force plates. We had a force plated treadmill that was, unbelievable to use. And he just, I try to pick his brain as much as I can, man. And he'd ask me more questions than I asked him because that's just the world of, tracking. And you know it, Ant, you've done it before.
Yeah.
I also met, one of my greatest friends over there, Rodney Hill, who's now at Duke. And we talk every day, me and Rod, man. We just exchange ideas and stuff. So, I mean, it's been quite a journey. Pratik Patel, who's a nutritionist there, great guy. Still talk to him to this day. I kind of don't try to burn bridges with anyone, man. He's all smart people I worked with.
Yeah.
Got on at Fordham right after the New York Giants in 2018. Fordham was home for me for a while because I started there as a part-time strength coach for 2 years. And I'm still working at Hackensack UMC, man. So that didn't disappear. I'm grinding, man. I'm just making money. People always said, "Gee, you're a hustler." I said, "Yeah, I don't want to. I'm not a hustler. I just know how to just get it going, man. You can't, complain about things, man. You got to find solutions, right?"
Yeah, Italians know how to get the job done.
Italian Job. Well, that was a movie, so. But I'm working at Fordham. I'm working in New Jersey. I'm paying New York and New Jersey taxes. It sucked, but working with Coach Gilfeder, Coach Giorgio, Coach Greer at Fordham, and we had an unbelievable culture that we developed there over time. It was sad for me to leave. It was hard, but I knew for me coming to Monmouth was the right move because I got family here. It's New Jersey. For my wife, this is more home for her. Happy wife, happy life. For me, that's very important. And, if I could check off all those boxes and still continue to do what I love, then, it's a win-win for everyone. So yeah, I'm at Monmouth now working with football, baseball, and the swim team, men's and women. And it's been fun. It's been great. I've been here for going on to a year now. And, I can't say that, I haven't done anything great yet, but baseball's winning, football's doing well. I've, implemented my own ideas and methods, which, Coach Ream here has allowed me to do. And that's awesome. So, I'm just loving it, man. It's great. We got the beach a couple blocks away. So when we're done in the summer, I'm going to take a walk down to the beach and just hang out, man. It's a great place, but my bad for chewing your ear off, man. But
no, it's good. I've never heard the story before. It's great to hear, to be honest with you.
No doubt.
I want to go back to the beginning because I do think it's interesting. I know at first it's probably, you probably get to the point where it's like the 1.7 GPA, right? Like for a while, and just being completely transparent, like that was my GPA when I was in high school, my freshman year, right? I had a 1.7 GPA. I went to public school and I wasn't really interested in anything other than sports. I didn't want to sit in class. I didn't want to do anything, right? And, all I was interested in was just, playing baseball and playing basketball, whatever it was, and I had a 1.7 GPA, and it's embarrassing, right? Like, and then it's like, all right, my parents are like, hey, listen, buddy, like, this ain't gonna fly. Like, you got to figure something out, or else, you know what I mean? So that was when they transferred me from another school and all that kind of stuff. But it is funny, kind of looking back on that now. It's like I used to be so embarrassed to like admit that, but it's so funny that you had the same situation. As you get older, you realize it's like, well. And I was just saying this on the podcast I did yesterday with Giorgio. Actually, I got Giorgio on here yesterday, and
nice.
I was like, dude, like, interest is the sole indicator as to whether someone's going to be successful in something or not. And you obviously recognize as soon as you got to the college level and you started studying biomechanics and movement prep and all the things that you obviously found interesting. Well, wow, like, what do you know? Your grades go up and you actually start to care a little bit more about something you're interested in, something you're passionate about, right? You're creating a connection, a community with the people and the professors that you talked about. So I think, it's just interesting. I think it's interesting to go back to that stuff. And like, I'm so much less like embarrassed about that now. I just kind of put it in a perspective. It's like, yeah, I mean, I didn't really have like a ton of interest in studying, I don't know, social studies or whatever. And I was a freshman in high school, and it was like my first time. I'm the oldest of 5 boys. So it was like first time where I'm actually, getting some freedom, because in high school, public high school here in, Connecticut, they didn't care. You know what I mean? What was going on? I was like, you just show up, got my flip flops on or whatever. I'm like, oh, am I going to class today? Am I not? Rather go hang out with the boys, kind of, you know what I mean? So it's like, but it's funny, you find some passion about something and your whole life completely changes, so I think that's awesome to hear. And then obviously it's like, the work ethic that you displayed, obviously deciding like, all right, I'm gonna wake up at 3, I'm gonna go all the way down to Rutgers, I'm gonna come back by 1:30, and it's like, what, an hour and a half drive from Rutgers if you're leaving at 12 o'clock, and then it's like, all right, I'm gonna be here for X amount of time, then I'm gonna go home and get like maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and then do it all over again the next day while you're trying to get your master's. It's like, it's not that you didn't possess those intrinsic qualities and that drive when you were in high school, right? Like, you did, obviously that's who you are. If you found something that you're interested in, so those qualities are obviously going to be expressed a little bit better than just like, oh, well, like, I wonder why Gio isn't getting good grades in high school when it's like algebra 1 and stuff like that. Like, why is he not, you know what I mean? Just everyone's got a different way of learning. Everybody's got a different way of attacking their passion. So I'm glad we could clear that up. And obviously you got, and now you made it, you know what I mean? You got you're near the beach, you know what I mean? So I guess that's what people consider making it and being successful. So that's awesome, man. That's crazy. That's a crazy story, dude. Like, that's
crazy. It is crazy, man. Dudes. And I want to add to that too, because I mean, we're all naive. You think you run the world, between the ages like 15 to 18. You got testosterone flowing in you, man. You're lifting weights. You're looking good. You think you're the man. So it's like, screw school. I remember I had an Italian professor in high school. I'm not going to say his name because I don't respect the man for what he told me, but he told me straight up, he's like, you're not going to be successful in life because of just the drive you show me in class. And I remember repeating back to him, I said, listen, when I get to college and I get to study what I want to study, I'll be more successful. So I don't want to study this. Yeah. So there's like an argument back and forth, and I, proved them wrong. Obviously I am where I'm at. I had a great GPA. Oh, to top it all off, I didn't even talk, bro, I had a 3.9 in my master's. And I should have had a 4.0, but the damn marketing class got me. And I hate marketing because of it.
Yeah, so, dude. Nobody likes marketing.
Just to show you, like, you go from like what the system tells you must learn, math, but you got to learn math. But like social studies, like you said, science is fun. Do I really want to learn Spanish or French? Like, I'm not really going to speak those languages in the career I think I want to go into. but you're kind of forced to pick in those things. And, whatever, you got some teachers in high school, especially in Jersey City, some of them teachers don't care about no one else's kids, man. Some of those teachers, not all of them, because I had some great ones, some of them. So they're just like dogging you. And it's like, you know what, get me out of this class as fast as possible. Let me just move on with life. But
yeah.
It is what it is, but yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I actually had an Italian teacher in high school my freshman year, and that was at the time where like you said, like it was like I didn't want to hear anything. All I cared about was like whatever I wanted to do. Right, you're a 13 14-year-old kid, it's just like I just want to go play sports, can't wait to get out of class, whatever.
Right.
And I remember she was really tough on me. I used to show up to class like half hour late. I would just be bringing my lobby eating in class and like that. And it's funny because her husband to this day still does some construction work. Like if I needed a job done or whatever, like I call him up and she still remembers me to this day. It's a funny thing about Italians, like they don't forget. You know what I mean? They don't forget a damn thing.
Nothing, man.
Nothing. So yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing now at Monmouth? Like obviously you've been to all these places and you've gathered up all of this information. You've also been able to gather a ton of experience and a ton of wisdom from a lot of these people. And it's funny, like you talk about some of these guys you've been around that you would consider high level guys, and you're like, they're asking me questions. You know what I mean? And that's so funny. Like the dudes I've been around who are actually like really, really good at what they do, they ask more questions than they give direction, right? It's so interesting. Right. Sense. And I would always be like, why are you asking me questions? I'm nobody, you know what I mean? But, it is interesting. So yeah, kind of talk to us a little bit about, how, some of the things that you're passionate about that you've kind of found, that avenue through some of the work that you've done in the classroom and then obviously through your experiences.
No doubt, man. Like I've always been like fascinated with, coaching and whatnot, just because of the improvements I saw as an athlete. So, what I'm doing here outside of programming, because programming to me is like, anything could kind of work. Right. If you know what you're doing, it'll work long term. If you're kind of just throwing stuff to see if it sticks on the wall, it'll work short term, but long term, where's the goal there? But working with baseball, I'll definitely have my pitchers on a different program than my hitters. And I have my catchers, which is kind of my hybrid group, because they're going to hit the ball and they're going to throw the ball, more than a pitcher every game. They're throwing it back. So I'll talk baseball first and I can get into more like football stuff. So baseball, I mean, right now my pitchers were in the sumo deadlift phase, just because when you look at the sport, they got to kind of spread the mound. So getting into that sumo position and pushing away, kind of helps. And I saw that at Fordham, with some of my pitchers that have, sumo deadlifted, that their pitch velocity kind of increased through the course of the season with the increase of not weight on the bar, but speed of a certain weight on the bar throughout the course of a season. So say if a guy's moving 300 pounds at, 0.6 meters per second today, next week he's doing it at, 0.65. A week from that, he's doing it at, 0.69. It's like, okay, hey, you're creating this amount of force at this amount of speed. Something's getting better and heightened neural activity or whatever the case is. I don't know. Sure. That's just what I love to believe is happening. It probably is, or the weather's getting warmer and the kids throwing harder, it could be a combination of both, which helps.
Yeah.
But I'm doing that with them, catchers. I'll get them in a trap bar deadlift just because I don't want to squat the guys that are in the squat position all day long, get them out of that position. Are they going to bench press? Yes, but with a dumbbell. Hitters, I'm putting them on a barbell. We're in an incline phase now. And I'm not scared to touch a bar, with baseball guys. Some guys say, hey, don't bench the pitchers. Listen, we're touching the barbell in the off season. We're not going to flat bench them. We'll incline bench them. It's been shown to improve pitch velocity over time. And every fall I keep hearing guys, man, I'm throwing harder this fall, coach, man. I've never thrown this hard before. And I get that feedback from when I was at Fordham from my guys, and here, first time working with these guys, they feel good on this program, but it's working out great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Winning games, I'm not saying I'm the reason why we're winning games, but guys feel better and they feel a little bit more robust, throughout the course of a game, which is good to hear. With football, Coach Ream does the programming. I'll kind of, he'll kind of ask me for some insight, like, hey, what do you think is going on with our receivers? Should we go up to 85% today? Do you think we should drop down to, X amount of percentage with these guys? How are our linemen feeling? So I'm kind of in charge of the polar heart rate monitor data, which also gives us GPS feedback. That I'm in charge of our Sparta force plate jumps. I never try to cross correlate data, just because I haven't figured out, hey, if we're running this much distance, how much of a drop off in our RSI or our jump height or, jump times does it take? There's nothing really there, and there's nothing in the research. So what I'm just trying to figure out now, I'm trying to identify positional differences and KPIs rather with our force plate, and with our polar data, I'm trying to more individualize positions on the field. So for example, I'm basically cracking down and studying the heck out of our receiver group. Our outside receivers are not going to run as much high speed distance as our slot guys. So our slot guys are always going to have a higher training load, higher stress response. Those are going to be our most sore guys tomorrow based on what we do today. They're going to have way more deceleration efforts and acceleration efforts than the rest of the receiver group. You know, you can kind of say, oh, well, they're all playing the same position. Well, when you really watch the film, your slot guy is going to run more ground. Right? He starts in the middle of the field typically, and he's going to go, you know, either left or right or straight or a combination of both. So he might cover 50 yards on one play. Where your outside receiver was running a 7-yard hitch, guess what? He's running 7 yards in that one play.
Sure.
Makes sense. And so it's kind of, so it's kind of one of those things. You know, same thing with our running backs. You know, we got, you know, our power back. We got, you know, I like to call him a hybrid back because he's kind of a power and a speed guy. Then we got a guy that can just juke you out of your shoes, and they all have different traits. Hey, this guy's going to get a lot more decels because he likes to juke, and this guy's not because he likes to just put his shoulder down when he comes to, you know, the next level of seeing linebacker. So, yeah, I'm at a point now in my career where I could confidently say, hey, I can break down a football team and identify certain KPIs and characteristics per position on the field. Now, is every position going to be the same? No, obviously, you got your skilled, big skilled and linemen, but not all your skill guys are going to be created equal. Sure. You know, safeties and nickel backs are going to cover way more ground than the outside corner is because he's just focused on one guy. The nickel corner's got to run with that slot guy, so I can cross correlate those guys. And your safety's covering a hell of ground because he's the outfielder.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I still haven't figured nothing out with the linemen, man. It's just those guys are just pounding each other, you know. So
I think that the linemen are always that X factor in a way where I think even people who are like pretty, you know, like well versed in any sort of like GPS technology or whatever, it's like I have like there's like always this like there's like two camps. There's the guys who are like, yeah, like I throw a catapult or a GPS unit on my lineman and this is what we track, and then there's guys who are like, you know, I just no, like none of my linemen wear, you know, O-line or D-line, none of them wear the GPS units or whatever. I just have it on my skill guys and my big skill guys, and we just track, you know, as far as running load goes, because that's probably the limiting factor for them. But one thing I found, I think it was interesting is I think it was Chris West that when I was up at UConn talked to me about trying to figure out what the limiting factors are for every single position. So I was like, all right, that makes a lot of sense. Now he was talking about actually creating a correlation between whatever the limiting factor was for that particular position, and then some sort of like off the field, like test metric, like a vertical jump or an RSI jump or some like readiness assessment. I never got that far into it just because like, logistically it didn't work out that well, but I did start to take a look at some of those limiting factors. So I wondered if like that to me, not only did it clear up a lot of what I was looking for as far as like GPS, like value, you know what I mean, as far as the metrics go, but when it came to actual programming and like communicating programming to like anybody who I was working with or anybody who would ask me questions about programming, I would always start with that. At some point I'd be like, okay, let me clear this up for you. Let's zoom all the way out. Why don't you just identify like the top 3 limiting factors for DBs, the top 3 limiting factors for safeties? And so like one of the guys I worked with played safety at Syracuse, and he was like, all right, well, the top limiting factor for a safety, at least when I was playing college football, was tackling in open space or open field tackling or whatever the case may be. And it's like, okay, cool. Let that frame the way you view programming when it comes to trying to provide the experiences that those athletes need to be put into when it comes to like on the field movement skills, any sort of perception, action, coupling, decision-making, whatever the case may be, all your sensory motor stuff. Like you always have like a checks and balances. So I don't know so then to answer your question, like when it came to the linemen, impacts were kind of what I settled on as far as like, right. Like I couldn't think of like much else. I mean, depending on the style of offense you're running or, you know, the defense, you know, what your defensive coordinator wants to do, ultimately these guys live in the trenches and they're going to be constantly engaged with one another. So you can get into the different types of like strength that's expressed, but I think like overall, if you're looking at metrics, yeah, you're probably looking at like contacts, impacts, and like the different like zones that they would kind of exist in. Those are so like, yeah, I was like basically limiting factors for O-line, D-line were contacts, impacts, and then limiting factor for as far as like GPS stuff goes for big skill guys were probably high speed distance for the most part. I mean, but you found a couple more. Like it seems like you've kind of like dove into that a little bit, and you've got a couple other metrics that you think would be a little bit more valuable for some of the, like you're talking about the different ways each position is played, right? Like you're saying right. Position within the position, right? Because it's like you have the position within the position and you have that player within the position, and every player is probably going to approach that particular position a little bit differently. Would you agree?
No doubt, man. And you know, I always like to tell people, hey, no position is ever created equal, just like no human body is created equal. You know, you got your longer guys, you got your shorter, more compact guys. So no, I mean, you're spot on. I mean, as far as, you know, like stuff that I like to look at on a daily basis. So it's a little bit different. Polars doesn't give you impact, which is, I really want something that shows impact, because I think that's critical for your interior lineman, your inside linebacker, if you have a fullback in your offense, or a running back likes to run right up between the tackles. But I'll look at training load, obviously, cardio load, distance, high speed distance. Then I created my own formula in Excel where I can see the percentage of that distance that is high speed, within a certain day. I'm always looking at maximal speed efforts or max velocity efforts, max velocity in itself, just because that's a king metrics to me when it comes to just the sport of football, because having to go from A to B in the shortest amount of time is going to get you that touchdown or interception or sack on the quarterback, right?
Sure.
What else am I looking at? Accelerations, decelerations, and time spent in maximal heart rate zone, because I think that's critical, especially in the hotter months. And I know people, I've talked to a lot of people, they say, we don't like to look at heart rate when it comes to, the sport of football, and I get it. One play, 30 seconds rest, 25 seconds rest, 4 downs, sideline for X amount of minutes. I get it. But in practice, you don't have that game type feel. In training camp, you'll never have the feeling of a game in training camp, because the first 2 minutes of training camp feels like a damn fourth quarter, because it's so hot. You just put the pads on after a couple months of not having them on. And I just think it's critical, especially in the hot months. We're in the Northeast, but I'd imagine down in Florida, Texas, Louisiana, they're probably putting monitors on their guys, because I'd like to see, hey, if we're spending 40% of our practice in our maximal heart rate zone, coach, this guy's not ready to go tomorrow. He will still be in an overtrained, highly fatigued state based on his other metrics that we see as well. So that's what I like to look at on the polar, on the force plate. I like, two different aspects of the force plate. And I like to look at some long-term athletic development metrics, and then some, fatigue metrics over time. So it kind of varies, and the fatigue metrics change. I mean, biggest fatigue metric for me are two of them, RSI mod and counter movement jump depth. But that has an asterisk on it, because if a guy's got to squat deeper to generate more force, but he's doing it faster, then maybe we see improvement there, versus if a guy's squatting deeper, but it's a slower movement just to get that force output, then we can say, okay, this guy's in a fatigue state.
So you can look at the amount of time. So like, say, because like old Franz Bosch stuff, right? Like, okay, like maybe it's not as advantageous to have somebody squat deeper in their counter movement, because obviously it's not indicative of or it's not realistic to the amount of time that you have to apply that force in the sport, right? But you're saying that even if, like you saying, it's okay as long as the actual movement itself is done in a rapid fashion, despite how deep they may go on the counter movement, you can track the actual like velocity at which they're dropping their hips and then jumping through the sky. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah. So, we use Sparta plates here, and they'll give us all, they'll give us the raw data metrics, which is what I always look at. So say a guy's, his counter movement depth is like, 0.4. This week, say, 4 weeks from now, it's at 0.43, but his eccentric and concentric time and time to takeoff dropped, and his RSI went up a little bit. It's like, oh, shoot, hey, he can move faster. He can get to those long ranges in and out of them faster. He's a more explosive player now. He can generate more force at a higher speed.
That's interesting, because it's like, all right, so you'll use, like, obviously just like any of the RSI jumps or any of these jumps, obviously, when you're taking a look at whether it be are you like kind of like mashing that up with some of what you see as far as like how much time spent in certain heart rate zones, and then you see like maybe on the back end you see like a drop off in some of these other metrics with the force plate stuff? Like if you have a guy who's like, yeah, I spent 40 to 50% in my max heart rate zone for my last practice, okay, cool. I mean, like obviously, like you said, you'd assume the next day coming in you probably see a dip in some of those things, but is that kind of what you're finding through some of the jumps that you're going with?
Yeah. So, I mean, I try to, that's why earlier I said I try not to cross correlate it, because I haven't found any correlations yet, or anything that could really say, hey, if this is happening, then we can expect this.
Sure.
Nothing with, maximal heart rates, because, we only jump our guys, once every 2 weeks, just because if I make it weekly, I just don't want to hear it from them. But I feel like every 2 weeks is good enough data. But I have seen, when guys are, accumulating a lot of high speed distance, and then we jump them the next day, obviously those numbers are going to be down.
Sure.
Which is, typically we'll jump them on a day where, it's either a Friday or a Wednesday. We were consistent all Fridays, then we switched over to Wednesdays when spring practice started. But, when we see a lot of high speed distance, we see some numbers come down, and those are just fatigue numbers. It's not even just an overtraining number. The biggest overtraining number I see come down over time, where we could say, okay, this athlete is beginning to, be highly fatigued, and coach, he needs more rest. And when we see that max velocity come down, I said, coach, he just ran a 40-yard route and he can't get to his, maximal velocity from what it was a couple of weeks ago. I said, maybe he's running too much. And then we'll look at everything from, the last 7 to the last 28 days. And we can, always say, okay, well, this is happening. Coach, you're spiking up a little too much. Let's bring him down. But yeah, with the force plates, I really haven't been able to say, hey, this is happening. Let's look at the poll. This is happening, just outside of the high speed stuff,
Yeah, no, it's just super difficult to do. Like, I remember like that was one of my like final projects for my master's, was I was trying to take catapult data from like the first, I took it for like all of spring ball. And then I tried to take a look at like any of our soft tissue injuries over the first 3 to 10 days of spring ball. It's like that. It's funny because like I ended up like, I went into it thinking that I was going to find a ton of, correlations. I was going to find a ton of information that I thought would be applicable. And then the actual paper itself came out to be me writing about how I think that GPS technology and the constant pursuit to try to find connections between things is actually creating more of a hindrance on us as coaches than it actually is providing value. You know what I mean? It's like I went into it like complete 180. It was like, all right, I'm going to go into this and I'm going to show like, through the GPS data that we were able to track and some of the metrics and how we overlaid them over soft tissue injury. Here's what I was able to find. Here's the correlation between like high player loads in the first 3 days of like camp or spring ball, whatever the case may be. And what happens as far as like injuries go, and like nothing was clear, right? Like nothing is ever like that clear. And it was kind of eye-opening to me. It's like, all right, I'm getting my master's, and it's like I went into this thinking I was going to write a piece about how valuable GPS data is, and instead I'm actually writing it about how I think we need to make just be better, like well versed and more educated in our like decision making abilities and planning and programming, and then just use GPS on the back end to try to like use this more of like a guiding light or a discussion maker, or kind of like a dialogue creator in some way, shape, or form. So have you kind of found that, like, have you gotten to the point where, with your time spent with GPS technology and just technology in general, that where do you place it right now, like in terms of your level of interest and obviously your understanding of its value? Like, where are you placing it right now in your overall repertoire?
I mean, I'm placing it pretty high, man, because like I love it, but I'm not like you said, it's not my end all be all.
Right.
If I see a guy, that's starting to come down on the force plate, I'm not going to say, oh, hey, coach, we got to change the way we practice. Hey, maybe get this guy. No, never. But, with our GPS stuff, it's more like I talk with our wide receivers and our DBs coach a lot about it, because those are the guys that are going to get you the most, whatever metrics that you're trying to identify as, markers of overtraining or whatever. Like today I had a conversation with our receivers coach. Say, hey, I said, do you have like any extra guys we could play in the slot? Because our slot guys are getting, these guys are getting a lot of work compared to previous days last week. And he popped up a good answer. He's like, well, we got one guy hurt, the other guy, can't participate in full outside of, Team Indy. And the other guys, whatever's going on with him is going on with him. So it's like, I get it. You're kind of handicapped, and you can't say, hey, we're running this play without a slot receiver, So it's kind of like, but I think the best part about it, Ant, is when you have the information to present to the coach, just to give them awareness.
Sure.
Versus trying to change a practice tactic, because that's never going to happen unless you have the relationship with the coach where it's like, hey, maybe today's a red zone day, or hey, let's start to schedule red zone days and plus 40-yard plays, and then hey, is this today we're working on just third and short, second and short type of plays. But I think that's when you have that relationship with the coach. That's just my thoughts out loud. Like if you ever have a relationship with the coach, I can trust the hell out of you. But I think it's great information and feedback to give back to the coach and say, hey, this is what we see with our guys in practice. Is this what you were expecting, or were you expecting something different? Because guess what, coach, I've been doing this for a while now, and I can anticipate, hey, this guy's going to be very, very sore tomorrow. He had 124 decelerations. That's a ton,
Right.
He had over 1,200 high speed distance. That's a ton for what he's covering, but, it's a great conversation started with the kids the next day. And to go off of that with our force plate stuff, I remember years ago, always hearing people say, hey, when you get these baseline numbers, to me, and there is no baseline number. The
baseline's always changing.
The baseline is changing. And to me, in the conversation with my staff the other week was, and I was talking to Rodney Hill about this, and Brian Johnson, who's at Cal, because we're into this stuff. And it's like, we have conversations a lot about it. It's like, hey, is there such thing as a true baseline, or is it, your early offseason baseline? How do you improve that? Right. then you're going to start your mat drills. Guess what? That thing's going to drop. And you can't say, hey, we got to get back to baseline. It's like, no, this is our mat drill baseline.
Sure.
This is our spring ball baseline. This is our summer training baseline. This is our camp baseline. This is our season baseline. And it changes. There's no like, oh, you were like this in February, man. It's August and you've gotten worse. It's like you didn't get worse. You're just applying a different stress at a different time of the year now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
This should be a different type of stressed baseline. Hey, this is your camp baseline.
Sure.
And then if he's a freshman, guess what? Sophomore year, you can say, all right, let's go based off of your camp numbers last year. Second week back from spring break. The second week back from spring break, you're gonna be so fresh.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Middle of camp, you beat down, dude. Those numbers are they're gonna tank. I could just compare you to week 1 of camp, week 2 of camp. Can we improve you in week 4 compared to week 3 and week 2? You know?
Right.
And that's what I did last season. We jump scanned our guys every Sunday, and I kind of called it our fatigue assessment. You know, hey, how fatigued are you this Sunday compared to last Sunday? And are you improving the rate of, recovery, and fatigue mitigation week after week? If you are good, we're doing something well. If not, then you're getting overtrained, beat down, and broken down. So
yeah,
I think that's the best and new approach people should take in viewing these type of tools,
Yeah, no, I think that's a great outlook. That's kind of where I settled on. And I was like, I think if you're just having a conversation with the coach, is like, hey, coach, first, I think like posing the question of like, what was the plan for practice today? Like, what was the emphasis that you were trying to get? Because if the emphasis was, and I'm not saying that like all football coaches, I would assume a lot of them don't think in terms of developing specific like physical qualities. I think they're out there and they're trying to obviously figure out a way to, develop the technical and the tactical qualities. And obviously whether or not they're addressing those is left up to debate depending on the coach and the program and whatever, but we won't get into that today. But when you're really talking about it, right, it's like, all right, coach, like say you had a specific plan. Like, what was the emphasis for today? What was the goal, right? And he's like, I wanted to do X, right? And it's like, all right, well, I have some data here that kind of confirms or denies whether or not we were in the ballpark for that, right? And then at the very least, say the coach, in my opinion, like, which, like I said, like most of them may not have, like, say the coach is like, oh, I didn't even really think about like developing or strategizing or organizing my drills or my practice schemes to try to emphasize certain qualities like speed and maybe like work capacity and some other theme, right? Like, eccentric strength or change of direction, whatever the case may be. I'm now more open to having the conversation with you, Gio, about maybe, kind of designing and maybe organizing certain drills on certain days to emphasize those things. And then you're telling me that we can use this data on the back end to like tell me whether or not that we're in the ballpark of whether we're accomplishing that or not. So I think, like you said, like, it's like, are we doing what we think we're doing? Like, are we accomplishing what we think we're accomplishing? And obviously I think that's the point of the GPS, to kind of, take a look at it, even within that context of just like, all right, confirm or deny. Did we do what we set out to do today? And I think, but I think going back to what I was just saying, like, I think the most important piece of that is getting people like coaches to understand that you need to get out ahead of the GPS data. You need to dictate and manipulate the constraints of the environment that you're in, to manipulate the practice times, manipulate the drill times, manipulate the drill type, and try to develop certain qualities within your players. It's not to say that they'll all develop the same qualities, but I think that would be, it's like, have you gotten to a point where you're starting to look at, and maybe not even having the conversation, but just like starting to look at like, or notice trends of like, hey, like, yeah, when we're running our like goal line stuff or our half line skelly, like we're starting to notice this type of, response in the data. When we're running a little bit more of our like open field stuff or whatever the case may be, we're starting to see this type of response in the data. Like, have you, and as far as like the heart rate stuff too, like, are there certain things that elicit certain, I'm sure there are, but are there certain things that you've noticed that have elicited certain returns on the back end?
Shoot. Now I haven't really noticed much. I'll tell you what, I'll give you a good example of today, actually, today's practice. So, our OC was in the weight room working out today, and I went up to him. I say, hey, was today, like a scripted red zone, like a low intensity? He was like, no. He's like, we just wanted to run, and he showed me, his play calling scripts. I wanted to call these plays today, and I wanted to call these plays on, our third down series. So this is kind of, what we wanted to do today. These are the plays we wanted to run. I'm like, okay. I said, because today, the data show me, today was a very light intensity day. And he's like, no, Gio, we don't really sit down as a staff and say, I want today high intensity, I want today low intensity. Right. And he's like, why? I'm like, you know what? I said, today was, today the data showed me it was a low intensity practice. We had low training loads, not a lot of distance covered, high speed stuff like that. So to him, it was more like, eye-opening that it's like, hey, they didn't pre-plan it, but it's like the script he had kind of led to a low intensity day. And I told him, I said, listen, these are, this is how you kind of want to, structure your practice. So it's not like a high day, and then boom, kid pops a hamstring. Oh, what the fuck you popped the hamstring for? It's like, well, you ran the hell out of the kid. He's running all these damn 9 routes and shooting and,
Yeah.
So, but not, I haven't, to go back to your point, ain't my bad. I got off on a tangent, but I haven't really noticed much drill wise, I do tag my periods in practice, and I'll go back at the end of the day, look at Indy 1, Indy 2, Team 1, Team 2, and try to find things. I'll tell you what I did do. When our guys haven't hit their max velocity within like a 5-day window, and shout out to Brian Johnson because he put me onto this one. When they haven't hit their percentage of their max velocity within a 5-day window, I'll tell them, hey, on kickoff period, either you're in or you're not in on a kickoff period. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to run. Give me a 30-yard full-out effort sprint. And they're like, Coach, I'll give you 50. And I'm like, don't do that because I don't need you to try to get hurt.
Yeah.
And they'll go out and they'll come back. What's my speed? And the guys love the speed metric. It's like, oh, am I the cheetah of the day today? Lineman, am I the rhino of the day today? I'm like, you got to hit your max speed on kickoff today if you're not hitting it in practice. So,
yeah. I think that's super valuable right there. Like that's
how, that's the only thing I really noticed.
Yeah, but that's super valuable right there. Like, that's kind of what I was asking. Like that's what I'm looking for. Like your coach, like right then and there is a perfect example of a coach saying, "Oh, well, you're asking me this question because obviously you think it's important to delineate between high intensity and low intensity work." So the coach is like, we don't really think about it that way. But now, maybe I'll start thinking about like, all right, it seems like when we script some of this like goal line stuff or red zone stuff or whatever, it seems to elicit a little bit more of a low intensity response. It's like, all right, that's cool. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of shit. Worst case scenario, you and the coach had a conversation today, and that's awesome. Like that's important. You know what I mean? Like that creates some longevity there. And I think, like you said, that is a great point. Like if you haven't hit a certain percentage of your max velocity, I always thought it was kind of like, I wanted them to be like at least touch 90 once or twice a week, maybe like 2 days before game day kind of thing. So like that is pretty interesting, right? Just kind of like exposing to some sort of high intensity speed exposure mid practice or whatever. And I bet the coaches probably don't have a problem with it because in their eyes, they're like, oh, you're making our guy do some work on the, on the sideline or whatever when he's not in, like that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So it kind of like fits the bill a little bit of something that looks pretty interesting to them. So that's really interesting. That is pretty cool stuff, actually. And how have like the kids responded to some of that? Like, they like having some dialogue about it as well. Like they obviously said they're interested. They're always interested in the speed stuff, right? But like, they try to provide feedback and create a little bit more of like a dialogue between yourself and the athlete kind of thing, and just more conversation based.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I feel like I have everyone's full buy-in with this because and one of the guys told me the other day, they're like, we really appreciate what you do for us. And I'm like, nah. I said, no, thanks for letting me, track you guys and collect all this data. And then he was like, no, Gio, I'm being serious. Like, we really appreciate you taking the time to really analyze us as individuals and, send the emails to the coach or have the conversation with the coach and, tell Coach Ream, hey, this guy might be banged up. It's not a good idea to squat the guy today. They appreciate that. So, my thing is if you have their full buy-in, they'll do whatever. I mean, the kids love seeing their speeds, number one. And it's funny, man. Sometimes coach would ask a kid, how you feeling today? I feel good. Feel all right. Okay, good. Coach walks away. Coach Gio walks up. How you feeling today? Oh, I feel fucked up, man. My knee, my back hurts, man. My foot hurt. I'm like, all right. You got to tell that to coach too, but coach is not going to take you out of your role on the team just because you don't feel good today. And I think a lot of kids are scared to lose. Number one, their starting position, and two, I mean, I don't know if scholarships are a 4-year basis, 1 year, one in, type of, I think kids are scared to tell their coach and the training staff that they're banged up because they don't want to get off the field. They don't want to potentially lose a scholarship. If that's the case, I don't know if it is, but they, they'll tell me and I'll report it. And then, I'll let coach know and, fill him in. And then, it's always good insight, but they love it, man. The kids, they won't give me crap because they know I'm looking at this stuff. I'm not just collecting it to just.
Right. But, just kind of going off that. I think it's interesting too. Cause like, I think there's so much value in the coach. Like he might not like go all in on some of this stuff and like start recreating and reorganizing the way that he like puts together his practice structure and all that kind of stuff just based off of some data. And I wouldn't suggest that anyone does. Like I said, at least at like, you know, the time that this podcast is being documented, like I am very much in favor of utilizing a lot of like Fergus Connolly's work to try to provide themes and then looking at some data on the back end to confirm or deny whether you did or not. But the ultimate success, I think, is the fact that your coach isn't demeaning the quality or like devaluing the value in the work that you're doing, right? Because I think what would happen is like I was working when I was doing like readiness assessments, right? And then one time one of the kids put on the readiness assessment that he was sore, right? And it was actually an accident. He just filled out the readiness assessment wrong or whatever. He must have like half asleep when he did it, but he actually wasn't sore. But the coach took it and was like, oh, okay. So I found out today, like X, you know, this guy's like sore today or whatever the case may be, and kind of ousted, you know, some of these kids in front of the whole team. So all of a sudden it's like the readiness assessment the next morning, everybody's feeling fresh. Everyone's feeling great because no one wants to admit like, oh, all of a sudden it's like everyone got 8 hours of sleep last night. Everyone's feeling a 10 out of 10 as far as the freshness scale, no soreness, no nothing. And, you know, all because the coach was like, oh, you kids don't know what it feels like to be sore. Yeah. And it's like, well, all right, I guess we could probably just stop doing these readiness assessments at this point because there's no point. Like everyone's going to lie on these things now. You know what I mean? And that was one of the things I found. Yeah. Like I tried to like do a little correlation between like RPE and the readiness assessments at the end of the season. And there was like no fluctuation, no variation, because it was just like everyone was filling out the same thing every day because they just didn't want to hear it from the coach, you know? So I think, you know, it's awesome that you're in a place where people are like, hey man, we really appreciate it. And it's a testament to you and the work that you've done. Obviously they respect your insight. They respect the work that you're putting in, and they know like it's coming from a good place. And that's why I think it's really interesting that you round out this story of yourself going from, you know, it's like, yeah, I wasn't really interested in learning, you know, whatever, Spanish or whatever the case would be, or math. And now it's like, I found out like what I was really interested in. And people genuinely are looking at it as like, yeah, Gio probably does really good work. He's probably really smart, but at the end of the day, he's a really good dude. And he's trying to do this to help us out. So ultimately, like, regardless of all the other things that you bring to the table, it's probably just like the good natured personality and characteristic you have. And that's why the football coaches respect the work that you do, you know? So I think that that's really cool. And I'm really glad that you're in a place now where you're closer to your family and you actually have the ability to express some of these things. But you want to touch on that a little bit, like some of the relationships that you've been able to develop and kind of like the dialogue that's been established between yourself, the players, the coaches at the place you're at, and how important that is to you as a coach?
No doubt, man. I'll start with the coaches first, man. I mean, the coaches, it's a great group of coaches, man. I mean, I haven't been around a staff that's been, you know, this gelled together. I mean, these guys have been coached together for a long time. You know, Coach Cal's been here for 30 plus years. Coach Bo's been here for, you know, a good number of years. I want to say 20 plus years. You know, Coach Gallo, offensive coordinator, he's been here since he was a player here, which is, you know, pretty interesting. So he kind of gets the whole culture. But they're not a group of coaches that are like, hey, this is the way we've done it. It's my way, or, you know, get out of the way. You know, they're very receptive to, you know, what we do on the force plates, what we do in the weight room, you know, what I'm looking at with the polar units. You know, head coach will walk up to me in the middle of practice, hey, how we're looking today, Gio, is everybody okay? Is, you know, who do we need to worry about? Do we need to pull somebody out? Do I need to give somebody more rest? You know, and if I'm concerned, I'll tell them, hey, I'm concerned about this guy, you know, just keep an eye on him. You don't got to pull him out, just keep an eye on him. And then, you know, I'll tell the position coach the same thing. And those guys know they're fine with it. You know, there's times when I told him last year in camp, hey, you know, this guy's training loads at, you know, it's pretty high for, you know, we're in period 12 only. I mean, that's just like end of the game number for him right here. And he pulled him out of practice. And that to me was like, well, Dan, this is a staff that really takes information and applies it. They just don't put it in the back pocket and, you know, talk about it later. You know, it's like,
it's not just a recruiting tool.
Right. Exactly. You know, and we show our recruits everything that we do for them. And I don't talk to them because I'm just not around for them, but whatever. But the relationship with the players, man, let me tell you, Ant, man, these dudes, they be trying me, man, but I got them down packed. Don't worry about me, man. I'll be in that locker room. You know what it is when you spend time with them on that level, because I'm in the locker room, our polar station's in the locker room. I'm uploading data, and I'm, you know, I don't want to say hanging out with the kids, but that's particularly what I'm doing when I'm uploading the data. And we talk about everything, man. We talk about, we talk about football. We talk about fantasy football. We talk about, you know, they talk about girls. I'm not going to say I'm married. Love you, babe. It's a locker room, man. You're going to talk about locker room stuff. And that's just the culture. And it's funny because like one of our receivers who just graduated left. And, you know, the two guys that had a locker room next to him, like, yo, we're going to put white tape up here and we're going to put Coach Gio, and this is your locker, Coach. And the other guy across the locker room was like, nah, we're going to put Coach Gio's locker right here. And it's like, when you hear that stuff, it's like, man, these kids, you know, they really mess with you, man. And it's pretty dope. But they got, you know, they got my full trust. You know, I got their full trust. And it's funny, when I first got here and we're doing our force plate jumps, this is before I even knew what I wanted to look at with these force plates. They hated it. They hated it. They hated it. Now it's at a point where they know what I'm identifying. They know what I'm looking for, and they execute it. And now they compete against themselves, not each other. Cause I keep telling them, I say, you can't compete. Don't compare yourself to him. He's him. You know, you're you. I said, we need to make a name out of you now. You know, one of our guys, one of our guys, he wants to go play in the league, and I'm all for it. One of his favorite player he emulates is Jamal Adams. And I'm like, listen, that's awesome. I love it. You want to play like him, but you got to make people want to say your name and you be their favorite player and buy your jersey off the racks one day and not Jamal Adams anymore. So that's the goal now. And he's all in on it, man. He's a dog. And I love him, man. He's working his ass off. But
that's awesome.
I feel like when I connect on the kids on that level, shoot, man, forget the science. And I'm like a part nutrition coach of these kids, man. I don't got meal plans going for them, but I have like meal guides for them, like calorie counts for them. You know, hey, you need to lose weight. You need this, what you need to eat per day. You need to gain weight. This is what you got to eat per day. I have like little pamphlets for them. And we got guys from all these schools that transfer in that are like, man, we didn't do half the stuff you guys doing here. And that's a bigger school. And it's like, listen, I'm not trying to one up the bigger schools. I just tell the kids, listen, I love what I do, man. And I'm not trying to use this as a stepping stone for the next job. I'm trying to make this the all-time job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no doubt. Making the big time where you're at.
That's what it is, man. You know, so. And when kids get your trust, because they know coaches come and go with sometimes, you know, our DB coach, great guy, he just left, you know, and not knocking him, you know, not saying it was a stepping stone for him, but he wanted bigger and better for his career and get closer to his family, which he did. So, you know, power up to him. And it's kind of, you know, it sucks for the kids, but when you're a coach and you can say to the kids, listen, I ain't going nowhere. And they see it and they feel it and they believe it, then you get their trust, you get their full appreciation, you know, they'll share any type of information with you, you know? Which helps coaching, you know, which helps coaching. So
yeah, exactly. That line of communication and that transparency. I mean, that's something that, I mean, you've hit the pie in the sky there. If you can have that, then, you know, you do all the sumo deadlifts and the trap bar deadlifts and, you know, force plate jumps in the world. It's like, at the end of the day, if they're communicating with you, they're honest with you, and they understand that you guys have a two-way street where it's like, yeah, I'm going to be honest with you, but like, you're also going to be like, hey, listen, I need you to really, like, you know, I still am going to, you know, expect, you know, you to be tough and you to be, you know, obviously to be smart about what the decisions that you're making or whatever. But it's like, don't, I'm not like the, you know, like I think at some points, like some coaches make it a little too close to players to the point where it's like the players know, like, hey, if I go to this dude and let him know that I'm hurt right now, he'll take it easy on me so I can get an easy out for today. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm sure they still know you, they know your personality, and your personality is, hey man, I'm still expecting you to be a dog every day. You know what I mean? But I'm going to guide you. Obviously, if you're honest with me and be honest with you, and I'll make sure you're getting taken care of. But if you bullshit me, you know what I mean, then we're going to have a different problem. Then we're going to have a different situation. You know? So
it's funny though, because sometimes they'll be like, oh, Coach Gio, I'm just letting you know, man, my back hurts right now. And I'm like, but you're going to do it, right? It's like, no, yeah, I'm going to do it. I just want to let you know. I just want to make you aware. And I'm like, we be soft as hell right now. And then there'll be a day when I'm just chilling and looking into space and they're like, yo, Coach Gio, you all right? I'm like, I'm straight. Well, you being soft as hell right now, Coach Gio. I'm like, I said, yeah. I said, keep me in check. I like that. And, you know, but that's the bond we got, you know. So they keep me in check. I keep them in check, you know.
That's
whatever.
Awesome.
I mean, they respect me, you know. So sometimes, you know, we'll talk. They'll talk to me like I'm a boy sometimes. I'm like, listen, and I got to bring them down to earth. Like, listen, there's that fine line.
Yeah.
I'm not your man's. We're cool, but don't cross that damn line. You can call me soft and all that, but don't, you know what I'm saying? Don't take it over there with it, man.
They don't want to bring out the jersey. Yeah, they got problems then.
And listen, and if it happens, and I just have a conversation. I'm not a punk ass coach. I'm not going to go punish a kid, make him, you know, do a punishment just because he says something. I said, listen, we're cool, but we're not that cool. You got me? You know, and then they respect you even more when shit happens like that, you know. So
that makes sense. Well, we're coming up on an hour right now, so I don't want to hold you here forever. I know you got some free, you say you got free time, but I know you're a busy man. You got stuff to take care of. But I do want to make sure that before we finish up, that you get a chance to kind of pump any publications that you've done. Obviously the podcast that you run, like you mentioned before, and then your social media, any other content, you know, maybe not even resources that you're a part of, but just resources that have really helped you gain knowledge and that you can provide to the listeners. Like, you know, have at it and kind of like run through all that stuff for us now.
No doubt, man. You make me think now, man. I hate thinking, but publications, man. I used to write for Stack Magazine, but I don't even like the public. I gotta say, because I did it, but I don't like to publicize that now. But I did that for some time, wrote about some stuff. So if you want to see what I was early in my career, just type in Stack Magazine, Coach Gio. and you can read how like naive I was as a strength coach. I thought,
yeah, it's good. It's good to have some of that stuff documented.
I thought I knew everything, and everyone
Yeah.
goes through that phase where you think you know everything until you learn some stuff, man.
Yeah.
But I also, I got my website, coachgiograssi.com, where I'm not gonna lie, I've been lazy with it, been busy with it. I used to blog, and I had my ACL return to play blog posts up. I haven't blogged in a minute, but I do have my podcast on there, Toes on the Line, which I try to bring on, coaches that I know, coaches that I believe have some, great insight, great input, great knowledge that people just haven't heard yet, And I'm not knocking the big names like, your Ron McKeefer's or your Cal Dietz, but, big respect to those guys for what they've done for the field and, what they've done in their careers. But I feel like, with my podcast, I want to identify, other talents,
Sure.
names you haven't heard before. And it's like, wow, Coach Grasso. Okay. Yeah. Oh, Coach Rodney Hill. Okay. Yeah. Everyone knows Rodney Hill now. Coach, well, everyone knows this guy now, so I'm listen, I don't got the biggest podcast on Apple or Spotify. A buddy of mine said I'm the Joe Rogan of strength and conditioning, and I hope I am. And I hope I am. Right? I'm trying to get there.
That's the belt you want.
Yeah, man. But I'm trying to just create connections with that and just bring on people who I believe have knowledge listen, you're smart. Let's talk about it on air, man. And let's let people listen to it, man. Stop trying to downplay yourself, That's what I do with my podcast. But stuff. I mean, what else did you ask? My bad, man.
Social media stuff. Like you got a social media.
Oh yeah, social media. Yeah. So
you're always posting good stuff on social media for sure. At least on Instagram. I don't go on Twitter much, but yeah, Twitter, Instagram, whatever.
I appreciate it, man. I'm a little more active on on Twitter. I'm more active on Twitter, and I don't even know my tag name. I think it's Coach Gios CSCS or something like that. It might just be Coach Gio Grassi. I don't even know, but Coach Gio.
It is. I think I follow you, but you don't follow me back. You know what?
I big time you.
You big time me, bro. Everybody big time me. I got like 4 followers, bro. I'm like never on this thing, but like
I had a big time somebody.
I have seen like a few of your posts. I'm like, oh, this is good shit. Like I gotta follow Gio here. Let me let's see. Let me try to find your account and see if I get the exact. Yeah, it's Coach Gio Grassi. So Coach Gio
Grassi. Okay.
Yeah, Grassi. Yeah.
Yep,
Good stuff
Gio
there.
Grassi. That's my Twitter. I think that's my Instagram as well.
Yeah,
I believe so. On Instagram, listen, I'll like if I tweet something, I'm taking a picture of it and then I'm putting it on my Instagram story, or I'll post it. I'm corny as hell like that. Right? I'm like that, right? But at the same time, my Instagram is more, like I'll post videos of my guys training, like, hey, I think this is cool. Let me post this. People have been asking me to post stuff about my Polar and my Sparta dashboards, but I'm like, I want to keep that stuff in house, man. Don't worry about it, folks. Let's talk about it, right?
yeah. Chill.
I'm big time you on that stuff. Yeah. But I think I should just open up a little bit and talk about it, man. Because not gonna lie, man, this podcast right here, and this made me realize that maybe I should just be a little more open to talk about it. It's the first time I'm really open talking about it versus just a phone conversation with someone. But yeah, that's that. I'd say follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Give me the followers on the gram. Check me out on Twitter because I'm way more active. And I'm always talking about soccer on Twitter, man. So if you're a soccer fan, you'll love me.
100%, dude. Yeah, we got to talk soccer soon for sure. We got a lot to talk about, dude.
We ain't talking about the World Cup though. We ain't gonna be talking about that.
No, we don't need to go that route. That was a disgusting day. I don't even want to think about that. Yeah. Well,
and just to add on real quick with social media, right? One time, Facebook, if you try to add me as a friend, I won't add you. I just keep that for very close friends and family. That's that for me. And the LinkedIn, that's my professional account. I might give you a follow a month later because I'm barely on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I'm convinced that no one actually goes on LinkedIn. Like it's just like it's like well, they do it, but it's like you said, it's like once a month. You know what I mean? It's like everyone's on there, but no one's on there. It's the most. It's one of the most awkward.
It's a social media resume.
Yeah,
LinkedIn,
exactly.
That's all it is.
Yeah. Hey, just so you know, I'm about 3/4 of the way through my 4th time watching Sopranos. So that's like, I just wanted to let you know that's like my
your 4th time.
Yeah, like decent achievement right there. Like it'll be, and I'm flying through it this time, like way faster than before. And they pick up on, different things every single episode. I don't know if it's like you can watch it faster when you are looking for something different, but like right now I'm like focusing solely on like all the therapy sessions, and then like I'm realizing more and more. People say this all the time, like, yeah, every time I watch this movie or watch this show, I pick up more and more. I think Sopranos is the show. Like you could probably watch that show like 30 times, and every time you watch it, you would pick up something different. It's unbelievable, dude.
Dude, that's how it was with Game of Thrones. When I rewatched Game of Thrones, I was like, oh my God, season 1 makes so much sense to me now. You know?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I haven't watched Game of Thrones. I've watched bits and pieces of it because my brother's like obsessed with it. But I might actually.
Did you watch the Sopranos movie?
I sort of did. I didn't for the longest time because I really genuinely wasn't interested. And then I watched it, like I started it, and I like fell asleep, and I was like, I don't want to. I didn't like it, to be honest with you.
You know, same, I fell asleep too. I'm like, and I woke up the next day. My wife was like, I was like, how was it? She was like, you fell asleep. I'm like, yeah, but did you like it? She's like, I thought it was okay. And I'm like, so it wasn't good. I was like, I fell asleep. There wasn't no action in there, man. And they're just talking about. Man, look, I'll tell you about Newark, New Jersey, and Jersey City, man. Forget the movies, man. All right?
Yeah, like I thought I just think it's such a. It's not like I'm trying to like criticize like it's a difficult movie to do. Like it's probably one that just shouldn't have been done. Like it's a good, like it had a ton of potential as far as what the theme and the plot were going to be, right? It's like, all right, we didn't truly know a ton about Dicky Moltisanti from The Sopranos, and you obviously have Tony's son playing him as a younger version of him. Like it had potential, and I understand it, you know what I mean? It's just such a difficult movie to do because nobody, I don't care who you are, nobody is doing Paulie Walnuts better than Paulie. No one's going to be Silvio better than Silvio, and no one's going to be Tony better than Tony. Like it's just, there are just these characters that you cannot recreate. I don't care how good of an actor you are. It's like, it's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? Those guys originate, like they are the OGs of those particular characters.
Oh, hell yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think they just try to like emulate this whole aura of like, you know, Gandolfini's son playing, you know, Gandolfini in the film. And it's like, everyone's like, oh my God, Soprano's son's playing Soprano. And as the young Sopranos, and then they start to talk about, like you said, like Moltisanti's dad. And it's like, we never heard about him in the Sopranos show unless, you know, what's his name? Yeah. Tony was talking to, you know, Moltisanti about him, but it's like, I feel like you said, there shouldn't be like remakes of stuff. There shouldn't be like a prequel of a movie that came out. It's like, you might've just messed it up, man.
Yeah. Like the only like prequel I think I've ever seen that I actually liked is Better Call Saul. And obviously it's a prequel to Breaking Bad.
I heard that was good.
Honestly, like there's some people who think Better Call Saul is actually better than Breaking Bad. I like kind of go back and forth, but I think Better Call Saul is phenomenal. I think that's the only time I've ever seen something like that where I was like, okay, yeah, like that's really good. You know what I mean? Most of the time it's like it's a butcher job. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I think the one takeaway I have from this time around watching Sopranos is like, nothing ever changes. Have you ever heard someone talk about Sopranos and be like, yeah, I don't know, like someone who like didn't like it or whatever, and was kind of like, yeah, it's okay. Like, I feel like not a lot like happens, or like something like nothing really like changes, or it's just kind of like this. Cause it's like, that was the first like anti-hero TV show where it's like, it wasn't like a Netflix drama where like at the end of every episode, it was like, you were going to be hanging on and you had to come back. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's just a story. It's a story of all these people.
It's everyday life.
It's everyday life. It's normal everyday life. It's not this like overly dramatic adventure. It's like, this is everyday life for these families and the people and what they do. And it's like every character in the show is vital, but like every single character in the show has these major vices that they never seem to overcome. And they all fall victim to constantly over and over again. Like the reason why the therapy never works for Tony is the fact that, and I think that that's another thing to point out, like the therapy never works. Like people, like he always keeps saying like, it never works for him.
It's a drug. He just kept going back to it.
He kept going back to it, and it never worked because he could never fully invest in the therapy. He could never truly tell Dr. Melfi what was going on in his life.
Exactly.
There's no point to it. Yeah.
She kind of had a feeling like, oh, I kind of know what you do, but I can't address it. I need you to say it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, she thinks she can, you know, save him in certain regards, but she can't. You know what I mean? You can't change shit. Like Tony is legitimate sociopath. I think it's funny. Like Tony was, I think, the first character in like television where it was like, I'm rooting for the bad guy. Cause like Tony's like deep down, like he wants to be a good guy, but like it's not in his nature. Like he's a sociopath. I mean, let's be honest. He's a terrible dude. You know what I mean? But it's like his character, it's raw. You know what I mean? Like he's a rough dude, you know, but he's got some things to square away, and they all do, but they all, like, none of them can get out of their own way. Like they are all victim to the constant everyday vice. You know what I mean? None of them can make the right choices. They all lie to each other. It's like they create this like facade of a family, but like they are the opposite of a family, you know?
Right. It's like a dysfunctional family that's together, but like the wife wasn't leaving because of something. He wasn't leaving his wife because of something. You know, the kids were staying home, but the daughter went to college, but she always came back home because of something. The one thing I never understood about that show, and I'm still trying to think about it, was his passion for like animals. Remember that horse that he owned?
Yeah, Pyomai. Yeah.
Yeah.
That, the ducks.
It was that just never made sense. I'm
Yeah,
like,
I forgot.
is that like a
What it,
sociopath's quality or?
what was it? They talked about it in one of the therapy sessions. I think it was, she was trying to explain the way that he would look after the ducklings in a similar fashion to the way I think that like his mother or his father didn't look after him, kind of thing. I forget.
Okay.
I forget what it was, but he did have a serious passion for animals. And I think she points out that like she was doing some research on sociopaths, like, and she brings it up in like either within that therapy session or one where she was talking to her own therapist, where she's like, yeah, I was recently doing some research and like I found that like a lot of sociopaths are actually really like generous towards animals for some reason. And she's like, it's Tony's really interested in, you know what I mean? So I'll have to come back to you on that and get some, like, I know it has something to do with that. There was some sort of connection there, but I think, and you know, go back, like Meadow is brutal the whole series, like AJ brutal the whole series, like they're all,
He was terrible.
they're all there, like they suck, like they're just like, they're terrible, like they're just so obnoxious. And it's like not the actors, obviously the actors are, I'm just saying like the characters themselves, like, and that's the thing is like everyone in Tony's life is negatively affected by him, yet at the same time they all love him so much. He's the most like he's the best and worst thing to happen to everybody he comes across, every single person, every female he dates, everybody he works with, anybody who he's, you know, doing business with, whatever the case may be. And it's funny, I think that one of the scenes, and I'll stop after this, but one of the scenes that I thought was the coolest thing that I've ever seen in television, and I didn't notice this my first like 3 times watching it. It's Christmas and Jackie Jr. comes over to give Meadow a piece of jewelry for Christmas, right? And then Tony also has a piece of jewelry that he bought, you know, Carmela for Christmas, right? And this is at the time when Jackie Jr. is not on good terms with Tony. Tony's about done and had it with all of his stuff, right? And so he shows up Christmas morning, they're opening gifts, and the camera just keeps cutting back and forth to Jackie Jr. giving this piece of jewelry to Meadow and her being all like head over heels and, you know, feeling like romantic and connected to him. And then Carmela, you know, getting this piece of jewelry from Tony and her feeling all romantic towards Tony and connected to him. And it shows, it almost like encapsulates all 4 of those characters. It's like, all right, so Jackie Jr. and Tony are extremely alike. And Tony doesn't want Jackie Jr. to be involved in what he's involved in because of the fact that Tony knows exactly who he is. And he doesn't want his daughter dating someone that's like him, right? And then you have Carmela and Meadow, who are, it just shows in that scene, completely shallow, completely superficial, right? Like they associate money and jewelry with love, and that is how they are shown like affection and create, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, like, you know, obviously Meadows picked that up from the relationship that she sees with her father and her mother. And I think there's one episode that ends with it like that, and they're arguing at the dinner table and Tony's like, you associate love with money, and she goes, you associate money with love, or whatever. And then the scene just cuts out from there. It's like, that's probably that's a good wrap up of like what Sopranos is really about. It's like there's this superficiality is running through all these people, and they all have this like inability to experience joy. Like none of them can truly experience like natural joy. They're always searching for it through these vices. So
yeah, you're right, man. It's like real quick, it was like one big drug being passed around, you know what I'm saying?
It is. It goes always in circles. And that's why people, I think, sometimes don't understand the show. And I'm like, that's the point of the show. Nothing happens. No one makes progress because no one's willing to actually commit to the progress and the process it takes, you know? So,
and I just want to add on for anybody listening, right? I'm from an Italian immigrant family, dude. That is like American Italian. That's not Italian American. So I just want to justify that. Justify that.
Yeah, like my mom hates Sopranos. Like anybody who's like a real Italian, they hate it. Like it really is. But like the show is important because it basically like the characters in the show are like our parents in a sense, where they're like, we don't like that depiction. Like Jennifer Melfi and all of her family will discuss, like, we hate the fact that like these mobsters are ruining the name of, you know, the Italians who came over here and obviously work hard and decided they wanted to make a name for themselves. And then Tony's like, well, you know, we Italians like created a lot of the wealth in this country, and we created a lot of the businesses and all these buildings or whatever, and we wanted to kind of have something from it too. But yeah, it's not an accurate depiction of like true immigrants who've come over here, done things the right way, done it with honor, done it with strength, like done things the right way with you know, high intent and high character. You know, it's not like my grandpa never watched The Sopranos. He wouldn't want anything to do with this shit. You know what I mean? He'd be like, that's not those aren't real Italians.
I was like offended by it, and it was a great show, but I was offended by it because I remember telling my wife, I'm like, they're talking such like American, it's not even Italian what they're speaking. It's like American slang Italian. Like gabagool is not an Italian word, FYI.
No, it's not. Yeah.
So, and my wife's like, it's like, so she was saying, I'm like, that's nothing. Like, what do you want me to say the right word? You know what I'm saying? Like, capicola, that's what you want. So
yeah, exactly. Like say it right. And it's so annoying now because like anybody who's like, oh, like Aunt, what are you? Like, yeah, like my mom's from Italy, and they're just like, oh, gabagool. And it's like, no, dude, like I get it. Like you're funny. It's funny, but it's not that funny. You know what I mean? It's like it's actually not called that. You know what I mean? It's like let's not go down that road. So all right, well, we'll wrap up there, man. I really appreciate you coming on. Let's get on the phone soon. Let's link up soon, man. I got some time, so like let's I'll either come down there or meet halfway, get some pizza or something like that. But yeah, man. Again, Gio, appreciate you coming on. Anybody who obviously is interested in all the things that Gio talked about today, feel free to obviously contact him through social media stuff. Go check out his stuff. Go check out his content. Go check out his podcast. And then yeah. So any last words, Gio? Anything you want to impart on the audience before we take off here?
I don't got last words for nobody, man. Just keep grinding, keep doing what you're doing. Just work hard. For anybody that wants to get into strength and conditioning or is in their 20s and wants to get up in the level of strength and conditioning, just keep working. Right? Nothing happens overnight. My story is my story, your story is your story. Just keep chopping wood at it, man. That's
no doubt.
You'll get what you want at some point. You just got to be committed to it.
No doubt. That's great. That's a great way to end. I appreciate it, Gio.